Hey guys, my name is Megan Collins. I'm a senior here at Allegheny College, and this presentation was included in my program for my senior comp on tarantulas and their conservation. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy. So as you can see from this picture on the slide, tarantulas come in many different colors and sizes. This is actually just a small portion of the tarantulas that are found in the world. There are actually 1,034 identified species currently. They're part of the order Araneae and in the family Theraphosidae. Now, this slide is to give you guys a bit of an idea of how their external anatomy works. So, their body is split into two major sections, the cephalothorax and the abdomen. The cephalothorax is protected by two rigid plates called the carapace and the sternum. The carapace is on top, and that's where you'll find their eight simple eyes. Simple meaning they each only have one lens, so they have pretty poor eyesight, and they mainly rely on these fine hairs called setae that are found on their legs and carapace to sense vibrations in the environment and figure out what's going on. They have four segmented pairs of walking legs, and these each have 2 to 3 tarsal claws on the end that are used to help them grip and climb smooth vertical surfaces. And the leg-like appendages up at the front of their body are called pedipalps, and these aren't used for walking. They're actually used for grasping and moving prey or manipulating soil to build burrows. And those are found on either side of the chelicerae or the mouth parts, and that's where their fangs are and where they eat. If you go down to the abdomen, you'll see two little things poking out at the end there. Those are spinnerets. That's where they make their silk in order to make webs. And their abdomens are a lot less rigid than the cephalothorax because they have to be able to expand to hold nutrients or eggs if they're a female. This slide shows a close-up of their 8 eyes. You can see they have two larger eyes with three smaller ones on either side. And this is a close-up picture of their tarsal claws that I was talking about. And the picture on the top right is a book lung. They have two pairs of these, and this is a primitive respiratory system that is basically just alternating layers of air pockets and tissue that allows the oxygen to move through. That's how they breathe. And they also have an open circulatory system. So they don't have any blood, they just have a blood like fluid called hemolymph that surrounds their internal organs. So tarantulas have a couple different adaptations or defense mechanisms that they use to defend themselves from predators. These are called urticating hairs. Only New World tarantulas have these, meaning tarantulas from the Western Hemisphere. They're located on the abdomen and they're used to, they'll get stuck in the mucous membranes or skin of predators. They'll create an itchy, painful rash or cause respiratory issues. You can see the microscopic image of them. They're very barbed. That's why they're so irritating. But in order to use these, they will kick them off of their abdomen with their back legs, which creates a tiny little cloud of them that can then get stuck in the skin. And as you can see, this can create a bald spot if they've kicked too many at one time, and that bald spot will remain until they molt because they have a finite number of these hairs. And they'll also sometimes deposit them in their webbing or their egg sacs in order to protect themselves and their young. So these are some pictures of tarantula fangs. They are venomous, although it's not medically significant to humans, and there are no recorded human deaths from a tarantula. They will, before biting, strike what is called a threat posture, which you can see in the picture on the right. They'll basically rear up on their hind legs and stick their pedipalps and front pair of legs up into the air to expose their fangs to scare off any attackers. And if whatever they perceive as a threat doesn't go away, they'll start lunging at them, and if they make contact, they'll bite. There's sometimes a dry bite, meaning they don't inject any venom. But if they do, it tends to just feel like a bee sting. It's not they're super painful, although New World or Old World tarantulas, which are found in the Eastern Hemisphere, since they don't have those urticating hairs, they tend to have more potent venom because that's their only defense mechanism. So that can be a bit more painful. So tarantulas are found on every continent except Antarctica, although the majority of them are found in South America. And in the United States, they're found throughout the South and Southwest, mainly in desert and grassland habitats. They're very solitary creatures. They really only interact with each other during the mating season. And these pictures here are to show the difference between terrestrial and arboreal tarantulas. So the tarantula on the right is a Mexican red knee. That is a terrestrial tarantula, meaning they either live in burrows underground or on the surface of the earth under like leaves and rocks. And then the one on the right, a green bottle blue, that's an arboreal tarantula, and they tend to live in trees or other types of vegetation, and they use a lot more webbing in their habitats since they don't have that soil to work with. These pictures are to show the difference between their body types. It's not always this drastic, but the one on the left is an Arizona blonde. You can see they're a lot heavier bodied and more stocky to help them move through the earth when they're making their burrows. And on the right is a pink toe, which is arboreal. They're a lot smaller, more slender, a bit leggier. And that allows them to move easily through the trees where they live. And this does tend to make them a bit more skittish than the terrestrial species since their temperament just tends to be a little different, but it depends on the individual. So tarantulas are nocturnal hunters. They use what's called an ambush and pursuit approach to hunting. So they don't trap insects in their web like other spiders do. They'll wait for something to pass by their burrow or whatever tree they're living in, and when they feel those vibrations, they'll attack, pursue the prey if necessary. They eat a variety of insects, sometimes other spiders, small reptiles, and mammals occasionally. But once they have a hold of their prey, they'll inject it with a paralyzing venom to prevent them from going anywhere. And they'll also inject these digestive juices that basically liquefy the inside of the prey and turn it into this soup of sorts. Because their mouth parts act like straws, they can't really chew their prey, so they have to suck it up through those straws. Tarantulas don't really need to eat that often. Young tarantulas eat every like 4 to 7 days. Mature tarantulas will eat every 7 to 10 days, and they can actually go up to 2 years without eating as long as they have access to water. This picture on the right shows what tarantula poop looks like. It's mainly just uric acid, that's why it looks white, with a little bit of solid waste mixed in from their prey. They actually tend to go in the same spot because they're pretty cleanly animals. They'll try to go as far away from their burrow as possible. So molting is a very important process in every tarantula's life. They all molt in order to grow. They have an exoskeleton which can't grow with them, so they have to shed it for a new one in order to get larger. And this happens usually once a month for young tarantulas, and then every 6 months to a year for older tarantulas. But that tends to increase as they get older. And this process, along with helping them grow, replaces internal organs and helps them regrow any missing appendages they may have. And they'll start preparing to molt weeks to months in advance. And some signs to look for are decreased activity levels, decreased appetite, dull coloration, a bald spot on the abdomen. These are just signs that they're slowing down and getting ready. Once they are prepared, they'll flip over onto their back, like you see in this picture here, and they'll secrete this special fluid that allows their exoskeleton to split open. And they can start basically wiggling out of it by expanding and contracting it. And once they've removed it, they'll lay there to recover for a little bit. This can take anywhere from like 15 minutes to 5 hours. Usually, the older they are, the longer it takes. But once they're done, they're a lot more vulnerable than usual because they're a lot softer and they need time for their new exoskeleton to harden. So they'll lay there for a little bit and then eventually flip themselves back over. And you shouldn't, touch or feed them for a week after this, just to allow them to get back to normal. And this is a risky process. If they get stuck in their molt, they typically will die. The best way to prevent this is just to make sure they have enough humidity and water before the process begins, because that's the most important part of ensuring that it's successful. So the picture on the left, this is showing the difference between a male and a female Texas brown tarantula. So you can see the female is a lot stockier and bigger, and the male is leggier and more slender. This is mostly because the females live a lot longer. Males only live 5 to 7 years. They typically die pretty soon after mating, and the females can live 25 to 30 years. So they'll mate multiple times throughout their life. And another way to tell if you have a male tarantula is to look at a couple of different structures that they may have. Not all of them will have these, but if they are present, then you know it's a male. So they have tibial hooks on their first pair of legs, and these are used during the mating process to hold the female up and out of the way. And they have these emboli or palpal bulbs at the end of their pedipalps, and those are used to transfer sperm to the female. So this is a picture of tarantulas mating. In order to get to this point, the male will follow the pheromones of the female to her burrow, wherever she's living, and he'll begin drumming outside of it with his palpal bulbs. And she will come out and sometimes respond. And if she's interested, they'll make contact, and there's a lot of leg waving. And the male has to quickly hold her up out of the way with those tibial hooks to prevent her from biting him. And then he'll use his palpal bulbs, which you can see down in the bottom, to deposit the sperm. And this only takes a few minutes. It's a very quick process, but the male has to make a quick getaway afterwards because the female tends to eat him if he does stick around. So once the eggs are fertilized, the female can then lay them. She'll lay anywhere from 20 to 1,000 eggs at a time. She'll create a mat of webbing that she lays them onto, and then she'll manipulate that into an egg sac, which you can see in the picture on the left. And this allows her to move it around with her fangs in order to make sure that they're getting enough heat and humidity in order to grow properly. Once they're ready to hatch, they usually come out looking like this picture in the middle. They don't have any hair. They're essentially immobile, so they don't really move around much. They just stay in their egg sac, although some tarantula species are born with hair. And then once they have their first molt a few weeks later, they'll look more like the picture on the right. They'll be able to move around on their own. And after a few more weeks have passed, they can then leave their mother's dwelling and find a home of their own. So this last picture is just to give you guys an idea of how their life cycle looks overall. So they start with that egg sac that I mentioned, and they'll have their first molt. And then once they leave their mother, they'll molt throughout their entire lives until they reach their adult size, which you can see at the end here. And that can take a few years for them to reach maturity. Thank you guys for listening. I know tarantulas aren't everyone's favorite animal, but after spending time with them at my job and owning a few of my own, I've come to realize that they're very unique, often gentle creatures that I think are really misunderstood. And it was through my senior project, I was hoping to kind of get people more comfortable with them by learning about them because I think people don't tend to know about these sorts of things. So I'm just hoping through like education and exposure, people have more of an appreciation for these animals.